It's been 3 generations of carbon IBIS Ripmos, so is this latest one the best yet?
Kinda worked.
Whoa! I don't know how he pulled that shit off.
Last summer, over a year ago, I started riding this very bike, but set up as an IBIS Ripley. Now I've had it set up as a Ripmo V3 for over a year now. So let's do a full 1-year review of my expectations and realities of riding with the Ripmo V3. Huge thanks to my friends at Jensen USA who sponsored this video. I've got a link to all the Ripmos available at Jensen, including prior closeout models as well. And anything you purchase from that link below will also help support my channel. You can see that link at the top of the YouTube description, and let me know if you have any questions about this versus the prior years if you don't hear my answers in the video coming up. All right, thanks Jensen USA, I really appreciate your support. Let's get into the video.
Back in 2018, I was honored to spend some time aboard the first ever IBIS Ripmo.
All right, it appears my bike is finally in the suitcase. So I still have to pack a suitcase and a backpack. It's 10 o'clock at night and we're leaving at 4 o'clock in the morning tomorrow. Oh man.
This is the bike that was very well received and substantially grew IBIS as a company. Since then, the concept of a long travel trail bike rolling on 29-inch wheels has become commonplace. Likely so in no small part thanks to the success of this very bike. Perhaps the Ripmo, among the carbon and aluminum variants, has become a more common sight at trailheads than Subaru's. Generation 1 was great. It had a stiff, stout frame and a gentle rear suspension that was easy for newer riders to enjoy. More hardcore riders would find it a little easy to bottom out, and the 66-degree head tube angle was sharp enough to impress the inventor of the Bowie knife, James Bowie himself. However, Generation 2 of the Ripmo would fix these issues with a more progressive rear suspension layout. The Geo also improved the slightly longer reach and a full degree slacker head tube angle. And in summer 2024, the Ripmo saw the largest overhaul yet.
Okay, audio sync, focus check. We got some focus. Are we in focus? Looks like we are. Today is, once again, new bike day. New bike day. New bike day. That's terrible.
The geometry again got slacker, longer, and a 5th size was added.
I just set this thing up, dual 29 rear, 29 front, which meant I had to flip the chips over. I also did the longer dropper post, and I put on a longer stem and a little bit taller-ized bars. I'm trying to make this bike just feel a little bit bigger because the size medium did shrink a little from the old gen to the new one. And they added an extra medium, but I'm not really extra tall, so I'm gonna stick with the size medium. I'm 5'8", 174 centimeters, so I'm pretty guaranteed good fit on medium. Let's ride. I'm not good at this.
The rear shock grew by 20 millimeters, decreasing the leverage ratio, and IBIS released linkages that allow riders to set the same bike up as either a 150 travel Ripmo or a 130 travel Ripley. For the first time, the Ripmo is now configurable to use with a 27.5 rear wheel. Ripmos in sizes small and medium ship in the mullet configuration. The new frame lost its iconic bent top tube and found a series of straight tubes. Back in June 2024, I was fortunate enough to receive 2 media loaner bikes, one a Ripmo and the other a Ripley. Thank you, IBIS. Of those 2 bikes, the Ripley always felt a little better to me, a little stiffer and a little more predictable. In fact, it felt like I had a warranty issue on the pre-production Ripmo, and we eventually put a different swing arm on it, which helped some. Despite the stiffness differences I felt, my main takeaway from last summer is that the smaller feeling bike with shorter suspension just felt a little bit more right. IBIS was kind enough to let me keep riding that frame, and I bought a Ripmo linkage, a bigger aftermarket rear shock, and fashioned up a new decal. Along with a 160 fork, and the former Ripley was now a Ripmo. I've ridden the Ripmo in the lush PNW loam, in British Columbia granite, in the sands of Florida, through the unforgiving Arizonan desert, and even in the aspen forests of Colorado. In all these amazing areas, the Ripmo did exactly what I asked of it.
She always has to show me up. Every time.
Climbing is a pleasant experience on the Ripmo. The suspension firms up just enough under pedaling if there isn't any excessive movement. When riding across town on pavement, the seated posture is decent. The Ripmo is truly built for all-around riding, and it's obvious just why this bike is so popular.
Down the trail!
While modern mountain bike geometry has generally converged, there still exist great differences among how brands size their bikes. I am 5 foot 8 inches tall, or 174 centimeters. I love the size of all medium Ripmos I've ridden in the past. Today, I find myself somewhat between sizes. The V3 Ripmo in size medium has the same wheelbase as the old V2, but the reach shrunk by about 4 millimeters thanks to a half-degree slacker seat angle.
I like this little jump. Phew. That's fun.
There is an extra medium size that replaced the old large, but that bike has a 22 millimeter longer reach. That's a pretty big gap, and I've stuck with the medium. I recently swapped on a Wolftooth 1-degree slacker GeoShift headset, and that has helped the feel of the bike tremendously. While the reach has gotten marginally shorter, the front center has lengthened, and the bike handles brilliantly.
Ka-king. Bonnie, you need to be in the video. You gotta earn your keep. Maybe I should be pedaling around in a circle while she chases me. So my expectation versus reality with the Ripmo V3 was that the V2 was almost like a little enduro bike. It had a trail feel, but it was stiff enough that it felt okay with that 38 fork and X2 shock. I came into the V3 thinking it'd be like that, but no, it's not. It's a lighter duty bike. It's built more around the 36 fork and the smaller shock, and that's probably a good thing for most people in most places, but it wasn't the expectation I had coming into it. And I feel like that's okay and something I should communicate.
The flavor of the Ripmo V3 is that it's a nimble bike. It has a short back end, and as usual for Ibis, not the slackest head angle.
That's rocky.
The way I've got along best with this bike is to lean into its smaller size and ride it like a shorter travel bike. This means steering around obstacles or jumping over them rather than riding straight into them. This means leaning deeply in corners, but not as much as on the bigger enduro bikes. This also means taking my time to enjoy the occasional manual from rock to roller. The shorter size is also a breeze to bunny hop. If you want an all-around bike, it needs to handle black diamond steeps in the mountains all the way to blue and green trails with the family. And the Ripmo does exactly this.
See if this holds for the day. Just wrap some Gorilla Tape around my housing after tucking it back in the ferrule. Fingers crossed.
Now, my single largest complaint about the Ripmo V3 is likely not one shared by many other riders. I felt the outgoing V2S was torsionally stiffer. Ibis even sold that older V2S with a 38 fork and an X2 shock. Those parts felt great, as it was a burly, stout bike. And while few are complaining about this, I feel that the newer Ripmo isn't as rigid as the prior. Now, I love me a good stiff bike. I tend to pump and jump a lot, and at 175 pounds, I may even be heavier than the average mountain biker. The Pivot Trailcat, GT Sensor, and Scott Genius, for instance, are all torsionally stiffer than is the Ripmo. I've ridden carbon wheels on all of these bikes, and they certainly can help, but the Ibis was the softest of all of these. It's been a minute since I've ridden the Yeti SB140, but from what I can remember, it has a similar feel of softness as does the Ripmo. The Santa Cruz Hightower V4 was surprisingly not as stiff as I would have liked, and felt even softer than this Ripmo V3. This stiffness thing is something you can definitely get used to, but when I hop on other bikes a couple times a week and then circle back to the Ripmo, it takes me a moment to adapt to it. I notice this when pushing the bike hard, jumping into rocks, smashing through trail chunder, and even when pumping hard. I eventually found I preferred the aluminum-rimmed Industry 9 Enduro 300 wheels. These wheels are slightly more forgiving than the carbon rims I use on the other bikes, and they match that Ibis stiffness quite well. With the aluminum spokes, they have an uncanny ability to generate speed by pumping, and I like that. While not many others will mention the stiffness thing, I think it's important. Greg Callahan, a top Enduro World Cup racer, races not with the Ibis HD6 Enduro bike, but aboard an extra medium Ripmo V3. He has the Ripmo set up with a RockShox Vivid shock and a Zeb fork. Personally, I feel the latest Fox 36 all-mountain fork, similar to a RockShox Lyric, is more than enough fork for the Ripmo. The 36 did get stiffer with its recent update, but even back in 2024, I felt that the older chassis was still plenty for this generation Ripmo.
Yeah.
The Ripmo is a fantastic all-around bike, but it feels a bit of a mismatch to me to go burlier than the all-mountain series suspension on this frame. I haven't had issues with the bushings Ibis uses in the lower link. I do need to tighten the rear shock bolt every once in a while, and if you hear creaking in my videos, it's usually because that bolt has loosened up slightly. I should probably Loctite this, but I rarely notice bike sounds when riding, only when editing or watching videos. I also never really mess with the in-frame storage. I don't really use any in-frame storage on any of my bikes. In my opinion, this is something many folks think they need, but very few end up using in real life. If a ride is long enough to need supplies, well, a backpack holds a lot more. Comparisons. I often get asked to compare the Ripmo V3 to the Pivot Trailcat, and also to the Switchblade. Luckily, I've ridden all three of these in a size medium. The Switchblade and the Trailcat both have a noticeably longer top tube than a Ripmo, a full 30 millimeters longer. Both also have a longer reach than the medium V3 Ripmo. I ended up doing the exact same 1 degree slacker headset mod to the Switchblade as I did on the Ripmo. The Switchblade definitely needed that more so than did the Ripmo. I was okay with the suspension on the Switchblade, but it also didn't super excite me. The Switchblade may be the choice for flatter terrain, but the Ripmo is my preference when it gets steep. Now the Trailcat simply rode like a slightly smaller bike, and the rear suspension felt spot on for me. Because the bike felt smaller and more maneuverable, I didn't bother with an angle set. The riding style didn't really require it. The Trailcat slots right between the Ripley and the Ripmo. It's torsionally stiffer than the Ibis options, which I definitely enjoy. If you like to jump and pop, you'll likely appreciate the more aggressive suspension on the Pivot. If you're more casual, the Ibis is easier to cycle into the travel. A bike no one is asking to compare to the Ripmo V3 is the Scott Genius. Scott's huge amount of doodads tend to dominate the conversation. I really like the rigidity of the Scott. It's a solid bike. I did not find the doodads very helpful, so let's just ignore those. The sizing of the medium Scott worked well for me and fits me better than the medium Ibis. The geometry with the 63.9 degree head tube angle feels great, but hands down, the Ibis rear suspension is more intuitive and just feels better. I found the Scott's happy place with being ridden as a lightweight trail bike, whereas the Ripmo is happier when exploring rougher terrain. The GT Sensor is another bike many won't be comparing to the Ripmo, but since I've had one here for the last year, I couldn't help but toss it in the ring. I really like the GT. At times, Logan and I would even slightly prefer it over the Ibis. The GT was a stiffer riding frame, and the suspension was great for our jump-infested riding. I found the GT Horselink suspension to ride just fine, and it pedals great. Ibis does have a slightly better small bump sensitivity, but the GT is more ready to take a bigger hit. Over the last year, this has basically been my go-to bike, and it's the bike I compare most everything else to. Also, when I travel someplace where I don't know what to expect, I grab this bike because it can handle a whole wide range of things. And I do complain about it being a little soft. It is a little bit soft. I would love it if it was stiffer. I don't want to mislead you that you should go put enduro suspension on it. You can, but I think you'd be better served with an enduro bike for that purpose. But here I am complaining about the sizing. I'm kind of in between the two sizes Ibis has come up to. And you might say, Jeff, your saddle is slid way forward. You're making it feel even smaller. Well, first up, the top tube length of the Ripmo V3 is 30 millimeters shorter than the Pivot Trailcat or Pivot Switchblade. Next up, when I drop this 210 dropper post, which I shortened to 190, I end up with rubbing of the back tire into the back of the saddle, like a lot of rubbing. So, to fix this, P&W sent me a Loam V2 dropper post. I'm gonna set this up at 175, maybe 180 mils drop, and see if that'll be the sweet spot where I can slide my saddle further back and still have more drop than the stock bike yoke post. Other than that, this bike's been sweet. I really like this thing. I ride it a ton. Huge thanks to Ibis for loaning me this bike. This is a V3 media loaner. Huge thanks to Jensen USA for sponsoring the video. I've got a link to all the Ibis Ripmos, the V3s, and prior model year closeouts available at Jensen in the description down below. Anything you purchase from that link will help support the channel, and that's how we all get together and make these videos happen, is through your support. Thanks to Logan and Riley for helping film, thanks to Riley for helping edit, and thanks to all of you for being here and watching. All right, I'll see you guys in the comments. Peace and wheelies. Good job, Bonnie. Good job being sad. Why are we sad? Because our expectations didn't meet our reality, but it was okay in the end.